Almost every time I go on TikTok, I see this ad promoting an older digital camcorder and how it will elevate your life, giving you that trendy 2000s aesthetic look. And all I ever think about, besides the fact that we live in an era of mass cosplay, where our identities are built off an artificial internet aesthetic and not authentic lived experiences, is how, ever since the 2010s, this nostalgic, grainy, even low budget filming style has become so popular. What's fascinating to me is how this style initially wasn't an aesthetic choice at all, but was just a result of available technology at the time. Still, now we see it seems everyone wants to recreate some sort of past look, while also giving the appearance of low budget indie authenticity.
Money is the anthem of success, so before we go out, what's your address?
In 2011, Lana Del Rey filmed a music video for the demo track National Anthem. The song would later become a single on her second studio album, Born to Die, getting a high production remake featuring A$AP Rocky. To many hardcore Lana fans, this early self-made music video, filmed in a Las Vegas hotel and edited on her laptop, is just another example of what makes her lore and artistry so alluring. Many fans jokingly poke fun at Lana's Pixar album covers, how she's been known to dress down at certain high-profile events,
We just got it from the mall.
or again, edit her early videos, usually wearing a cheap wig, acting camp, and giving a me when I was 13 singing while my divorcing parents argue in the other room vibe. In a way, Lana's early work seems comically amateurish to some, but I think the popularity and appeal of it represents a larger, more interesting theme occurring in art and pop culture right now. It's no secret that indie artists, or at least artists that appear indie, have been on the rise lately as corporate music labels struggle to maintain previous sales and realize that the appearance of authenticity is more important than ever. In this video, I want to touch on this trend, using the popularity of Lana's low-budget, amateur early work as examples, and break down how the current backlash against billionaires, neoliberal corporate socialism, and highly manufactured, carefully curated celebrities is not just affecting politics, but also our music and art, leading to the popularity of the amateur aesthetic and artists who appear more relatable, flawed, even low budget. We'll also ponder the notion that we are possibly experiencing a renaissance in Romanticism, but in a modern, refreshing way, as billionaire and technological backlash create a cultural movement that rejects materialistic, rational modernity in favor of authenticity, irony, and working-class romanticization.
This is the story of man's escape. From the shackles of commerce and industry to the freedom of nature.
The information superhighway.
Now, before diving into Lana and the Lizzie Grant era, I do think it's important to quickly touch up on what the indie artist is in general, so it doesn't seem like I'm saying Lana literally invented it. Now, indie originally just meant independent and referred to artists that released their own music without the backing of a massive corporate label behind them. But over time, it became associated with a specific sound and aesthetic, regardless of whether the artists were actually independent, with that aesthetic usually being defined by a slower, lo-fi, dreamy, experimental, or nostalgic sound. So think of artists like Florence and the Machine, Arctic Monkeys, Princess Chelsea, or again, Lana Del Rey. Now, for the sake of this video, when I say indie, I'm referring to the original meaning. So artists that either are or were independent, with their aesthetic and music usually being more niche or relatable than something like a Billboard record-breaking artist. This is where I like to point out that what we may consider the amateur or low-budget aesthetic today originally wasn't intended to be an aesthetic choice at all, but was literally just due to resource restriction, being that most people who are independent don't have that much money or access to high production equipment. However, due to living in a world where everything is digitally immortalized and can instantly be accessed by anyone, including newer generations, people often end up looking back on their work and, in an attempt to be like them, recreate and mimic their look. This time in an intentional, self-aware way, meaning now it's thought out and becomes a categorized aesthetic, which can also be argued makes it far less authentic and even borderline cosplay. Another example of this is how mid-century musical performances had a black and white, grainy look because that was the only choice for film technology back then, but people in the present look back on it with admiration and therefore intentionally recreate it, transforming it from something that wasn't really noticeable in the past because, again, it wasn't a choice, into something that now has intentional, specific aesthetic value in the present. In other words, what is considered an intentional aesthetic choice today wasn't always a choice for those in the past or for those who are currently independent or just an artist in general. It's often just because they can't afford high budget production and only becomes an aesthetic once they develop a fan base that analyzes, appreciates, and mimics everything about them. The indie aesthetic wasn't strictly due to just fan admiration, but also became a subversive way to reclaim one's circumstances. So, originally a music video looking grainy and low quality may have been because the artist could only afford a cheap camera or shitty lighting, but now an artist may intentionally use that cheap camera to subvert expectations and reject high budget mainstream production altogether. In other words, a low budget look has become an intentional choice, a way to make a statement on authenticity, irony, aesthetics, and society.
Bitch, I'm a cow. Bitch, I'm a cow.
So yes, no one single artist invented this low-budget amateur aesthetic, and almost everyone you see today who attempts to represent something like it isn't as authentic as in the past, but has carefully curated every aspect of their look because we live in an era of hyper-awareness, and it's kind of impossible to not think about how you're being perceived in a million different ways due to social media rewiring an entire generation's self-perception. This take also isn't intended to be super negative or berate every new artist as inauthentic because this affects all of us in a way and it's not really something we can control now. It's more of just an objective observation than a critique. But still, I think this appreciation and longing for art that appears more low budget or indie is interesting and reflective of how much people today really value authenticity or the appearance of authenticity.
God loves you, but not enough to save you.
We can see this aesthetic expressed with an artist like Ethel Cain and the style she filmed some of her music videos in, or again, the early work of Lana Del Rey, and how hers is often seen as poetic and empowering.
Femme fatale, always on the run. Diamonds on my wrist, whiskey on my tongue.
Any hardcore Lana fan is always quick to point out that she wasn't always Lana and has numerous earlier personas and eras, from May Jailer and gangster Nancy Sinatra to Lizzie Grant and Lana Del Rey with an A. Lana Del Rey has probably one of the largest unreleased stockpile of songs, estimated to be anywhere from around 200 to 400 of them in existence, with a good amount of self-made music videos out there as well. As a Lana fan myself, I've always had such a love and appreciation for these unreleased songs, and especially the music videos, and sometimes I really question if I'd be such a fan today if I didn't know they existed at all. Lana's early music videos can only be described as low budget and amateur, but the things that would typically make them seem cheap or random make them poetic and significant to those who like her work instead. These self-made music videos typically use clips from older Hollywood movies, random places, and scenery that has personal significance to Lana, with clips of her dancing, singing, or posing spliced in between.
I was originally just collecting vintage footage from different archives and setting moving pictures to classical music clips that meant a lot to me. Maybe there were places I had been where nice things had happened. I had a vision of making my life a work of art, and I was looking for people who also felt that way.
While some people interpreted these music videos as random, tacky, or confusing, I think they helped build intrigue and mystery, making the viewer think about their significance and wonder why she chose to include them. This early style helps create a captivating, non-literal art form, what some would call a visual form of poetry, where the clips and images she chooses don't always have literal significance, but are used for the emotions they elicit or the aesthetic they help represent. Sort of like a neo-digital expressionist style, collaging multiple different, seemingly random clips together to help tell an engaging story that feels personal and significant, but in a coded, symbolic, or mysterious way.
You.
This amateur style makes us feel like we are almost sharing Lana's memories or reliving her experiences, not just sonically or lyrically, but visually as well. Take one of Lana's more obscure songs, Mermaid Motel, from her first album, Lana Del Rey, aka Lizzie Grant, for instance. The lyrics are so simple yet so descriptive and poetic, painting a vivid, romanticized picture of a northeastern American life, visiting Coney Island, singing for her boyfriend while heavy metal plays on the TV, all taking place in a motel. The song is playful and romantic, but also somehow significant, with the instrumentals making us feel like we are in a dramatic 60s film, with the mundane experiences described in it feeling important, artistic, and beautiful. What is even more interesting to me though is the music video she created for this song back in 2008, which she uploaded to YouTube.
You call me lavender, you call me sunshine.
It's incredibly low quality, but I think the way she sings and performs in front of a backdrop of Dollar Tree party streamers with a wig on and dancing in a hallway feels relatable, but again, somehow also poetic. This low budget, grainy, mysterious video style is something Lana is known for in her early work, from Kinda Out of Luck and On Our Way to the Kill Kill and National Anthem demos. I've talked about it so many times before, but I think this style showed an entire generation of Lana fans how to view everyday experiences in a significant romantic way. Just using Mermaid Motel as an example again, I've moved all around growing up, and I always hated when we had to stay at a motel instead of something like a Hilton, but the constant romanticization of motels in a lot of Lana's early work not only made me appreciate them more, but at times even specifically prefer them, due to shifting my perspective and viewing these experiences in a more significant, artistic way. This specific shift in worldview is what makes the appeal in Lana's early, unreleased work so powerful. It has the ability to not only make one appreciate everyday experiences, but also reject what we are told to materialistically desire altogether, instead seeking out the mundane, forgotten, obscure, or even cheaper experiences because of their character and aesthetic appeal.
Open up a beer and you say get over here and play a video game.
Video Games is the last music video Lana made with this quote-unquote unreleased self-made style before she went viral and was signed to Interscope in 2011. One thing I've talked about in previous videos, but that I feel a lot of people overlook, is just the beginning of the video itself. It silently opens, showing an apocalyptic scene of a destroyed city, and anyone who knows the aesthetic Lana usually represents would instantly be thinking, why is this sad, romantic love song starting like this? What the hell does this mean? The non-literal nature of the clip instantly creates mystique and wonder, with some thinking it's possibly a representation of how her world has been destroyed due to a relationship ending, and others say maybe she literally just thought it looked cool. The point is that it rejects the literal nature of mainstream music videos and helps create atmosphere and mystery, drawing viewers in and leaving them wanting to know more about this new artist. The Video Games music video in this early self-made style can be seen as emblematic of not just the Lizzie Grant era or even Lana Core itself, but also just the early 2010s mainstream shift toward social media and the artistic decentralization it fostered. This is where I like to point out that I'm not sure Lana would have become so successful if she weren't at the right place at the right time. Any earlier, and she wouldn't have been able to go viral due to social media not being a thing. Any later, she probably would have been algorithmically buried, as thousands of other people with similar styles compete with her. She is a result of many conditions coming together at just the right time, allowing her to gain mainstream appeal and represent a new movement in aesthetics and music. Let me clarify what I mean by that. Lana Del Rey's mainstream career is due to a confluence of several factors, and it's not solely because her art is just that good. Remember, pure meritocracy is basically a myth. For one, her mainstream career can be seen as nearly completely the result of social media and YouTube, and the popularity of her GIFs and aesthetic on Tumblr would have been impossible if it weren't for the cultural shifts in self-perception and individualism occurring during that time.
Smoking pot and eating burgers.
The late 2000s and early 2010s can be seen as the birth of the concept of the influencer, with shows like The Simple Life and Keeping Up with the Kardashians gaining massive popularity.
Diamond earring came up in the ocean and it's gone.
And there's people that are dying.
The success of this new genre of television, the reality show, was highly influenced by hyper-individualism, or the idea that the individual and their life have immense significance in comparison to the collective and helped create a new era of celebrity culture where societal contribution, talent, or merit became irrelevant, with the individual having value simply for being an individual. The adoption of hyper-individualism in the 80s helped condition society to be so receptive to something like modern reality TV and eventually social media and the influencer, showing us that fame or importance doesn't require merit or reason. This further reinforced the idea that everyone and anyone can be worthy of fame and validation due to the new inherent significance of individual experience. Social media, the smartphone, and the viral influencer were just what Paris Hilton and the Kardashians created, but becoming accessible to the average person. These new technologies allowed us to shift our already hyper-individualistic worldview to an almost ultra-individualistic one, where we could literally record and post our entire lives and curate a new online identity, meticulously manufacturing its every aspect and giving our lives far more significance and potential with each new post. Think about life before social media. Seeing a sunset on the bus, watching a show in your living room after work, or cooking a meal would have been seen as unnoteworthy and mundane. But with the smartphone and social media, we could now capture that sunset to make our feeds look, quote, aesthetic, update our followers on the show we were watching, or post the meal we just made, proudly showing off our culinary skills. Social media allowed us to completely shift how we view ourselves and our lives, but also our art and ability to produce it. This is where Lana Del Rey and artists like her come in. Her early MacBook webcam looking recorded videos look strikingly similar to what many people were creating and filming during this time.
Chongalicious definition, arch my eyebrows high. They always staring at my booty and my panty line.
It wasn't uncommon to find people producing and posting their own music, uploading covers of popular songs, and posting their every thought on sites like MySpace and Facebook. In other words, Lana Del Rey and her low-budget, self-made, internet-driven aesthetic were the result of trends in society at large, not despite them. She is a product of the decentralizing social media age, and what she did was and is something we could and can also do with our own cheap cameras and online stock footage. While I do still believe that her popularity represented this mainstream shift toward appreciating self-made amateur art, I still think it's important to point out that she didn't really invent it. She just became widely popular for it, due to being at just the right place at just the right time. This confluence of factors from social media and smartphones to individualism and influencer culture helped create Lana and those like her, ushering in this new age of ultra hyper individualism, with every aspect of our lives now being recordable, postable, and therefore able to be given significance through the use of something like romanticization. But what is romanticization? Why does it seem like everywhere you look, everyone is talking about romanticizing this or that? And are we currently living through a neo-romantic era? Many people may be surprised to find out that romanticizing your life is not some new internet trend and has roots that date all the way back to the 18th century in Europe. Romanticism, or the Romantic movement, was an intellectual, philosophical, and artistic movement that rejected the rationality and structure of the Enlightenment and previous art movements like Classicism and Neoclassicism. The Enlightenment was an intellectual movement that rejected superstition and religion in favor of human reason and science, skepticism, individualism, free markets, and separations of powers, with the art movements that were popular during it typifying the values it represented. So think Neoclassicism, an art movement that was a revival of classicism inspired by ancient Greek and Roman architecture and art styles. Neoclassicism was defined by rigid adherence to certain principles like order, symmetry, and simplicity. To the neoclassicists and those like them, art was not just a fluid tool to entertain and express beauty, but had a logical, objective purpose to moralize and elevate society. These values mirror the intellectual values of the Enlightenment, rejecting the abstract nature of religion and spiritual superstition, and instead valuing reason, rationality, and inevitable human potential. In other words, these movements were sort of constraining and rigid when it came to thought and art. We like to think of art today as very free and fluid and anything goes, but neoclassicism and movements like it were very clear about what art was and the specific purpose it had. Everything was not considered art, and art was not just about free human expression. It was objective, there were rules to follow, and it was seen as a powerful tool that influenced society and human well-being. Romanticism was largely in response to these movements and rejected the values of harmony, order, rationality, and physical materialism. Romanticism can be defined by an appreciation of emotion over rationality, individual experience over collectivist dogma, an appreciation of nature and the world as it is, and just an overall skepticism of strict adherence to rationality, with an emphasis on spiritual, transcendent, and psychological experiences. One of the biggest factors that fueled Romantic era skepticism in Europe was the Industrial Revolution, where people were watching their environments rapidly change into polluted, smoggy, industrial cities and felt nature was under attack. The industrialization of Europe also radically changed how people had lived for thousands of years, with rapid urbanization causing people to leave their farms for the cities and working long hours in factories, transforming the individual into an insignificant cog in a massive, unforgiving, mechanized industrial machine. In response to this, Romantics placed a profound appreciation on nature and landscapes, viewing the world as a rapidly changing, uncertain place where the beauty and serenity of nature were no longer something that could be taken for granted, under very real threat from unfettered industrialization. Whereas Enlightenment era thinking placed great optimism in human potential, viewing nature as wild, without inherent value, just waiting to be tamed or sculpted by man, Romantics grew skeptical of this, with the efficient use of nature now meaning polluting factories, overcrowded cities, and the destruction of natural landscapes. This rapid industrialization also led to an appreciation for the past, or a rise in nostalgia, as more and more questioned the notion of inevitable moral progress and the inherent good of technological advancement. Romantics often obsessed over medieval history and folklore, appreciating cultural origin myths and the exotic, mysterious, distant, or even weird and monstrous. Romanticism cherished the irrational and metaphysical, inspiring a revived appreciation for the myths and folklore that the Enlightenment values worked to diminish. But perhaps one of the most defining traits of Romanticism is the emphasis on the individual, with a turning inward, focusing on human personality, moods, struggles, and just a fascination with human experience in general. This appreciation for individualism led to an emotional, subjective approach to art, focusing more on how something makes someone feel, and the spiritual instead of the literal, rational, or physically material. Now, some people argue that today we are experiencing a renaissance in Romanticism, with others pointing out that Romanticism never really went away. Regardless, I still think the parallels to movements in art and culture today are fascinating. Once again, the world is rapidly changing as we experience the fourth industrial revolution and are possibly on the cusp of the fifth, with artificial general and even super intelligence seemingly around the corner. This has led to a mainstream rejection, even hatred for AI, which is seen as sterile, lifeless, and dystopian, similar to how the rationality and alienating mechanical nature of the first industrial revolution made Romantics feel.
We are altering Earth's natural cycles. This relentless pressure on our planet risks unprecedented destabilization.
Now, the environment has always been under threat since the first industrial revolution, but today we see an exponential global acceleration, the Anthropocene, as humans radically disrupt and collapse Earth's climate systems. We can see this rejection of modernity and urbanization in the current love for Fruitigo Arrow. Or a 2000s aesthetic characterized by futuristic optimism, eco-techno-utopia, and bright, colorful, nature-based interfaces. People increasingly see the world and the one our technology creates as corporate, lifeless, and sterile, longing for a return to nature-based aesthetics and color. Gen Z and millennials are also commonly said to not take anything seriously, as we reject rationality in favor of irony and absurdism. Living through the information age and unfortunately becoming aware of the numerous existential, political, economic, and environmental problems we face has caused us to reject past narratives, instead relying on humor and cynicism to cope. This adherence to comedy and irony also mirrors the Romantics' appreciation for the childlike and youthful. Romantics often viewed adulthood as the great death, detaching from the values that make life worth living: curiosity, imagination, whimsy, and fantasy. Adulthood was rigid and sterile, oppressively monotonous and rational, while childhood was free, unserious, and exciting. We can compare this to just how much newer generations like Gen Z and millennials are obsessed with their childhoods and, quote, don't want to grow up, seeking comfort and nostalgia, and constantly defending their childlike whimsy and humor in social media memes. This romantic concept views adulthood as something to dread, something to avoid, something to reject altogether through the revitalization of youthful mindsets and behaviors. It seems nothing defines millennials and Gen Z more than our ultra hyper individualistic personalities and worldview. Like I mentioned earlier, social media has completely shifted how we view our lives and the events in them, allowing us to place more importance on subjective experiences due to being able to record everything and anything. Sometimes I think art is just taking something, limiting it, and capturing it through some form of medium. It's sort of like the idea that space doesn't exist until it's contained. Art doesn't exist until we capture it and give it that label. A landscape is just a landscape, something we objectively experience, until it is captured on a canvas, in a sculpture, in the words of poetry, or the pixels of an image. This is what the smartphone camera has allowed us all to do. We are all documentarians, capturing our lives and the events in them, and through this capture, granting it significance, allowing us to romanticize our experience. This new ability has allowed us all to post and share our lives, and due to the anxieties of a rapidly changing, existentially threatened, dystopian flavored world, we increasingly look toward the past for comfort, indulging in emotion and introspective subjectivity, pondering deeper philosophical answers, and longing for some sort of spiritual meaning that can transcend the horrors of the modern world. We see these themes reflected in the constant romanticization of everything online, from artists like Lana Del Rey and Ethel Cain, to the general decentralization of music and appreciation for the low-budget, authentic artists. Neoliberal capitalism has also affected our shifting perspective to more individualistic, subjective, everyday experiences. Now, besides the fact that neoliberalism already promoted a hyper-individual worldview itself to justify government defunding and mass consumption, I think it can also be argued that in response to it, hyper-individualism has grown as well. As the rich get exponentially richer and everyone else either stagnates or declines, we increasingly reject them and the lifestyle they try to sell us because we know it's an illusion, something out of reach for the majority of people, no matter how hard we work. We instead turn inward, appreciating what we already have, our own lives and their aesthetics, because it's most likely the only thing we will ever really own. We reject the mainstream consumerist culture, focusing instead on carving our own paths, attempting to find more personal, subjective meaning in our lives. I again like to compare this to the current rise in the amateur aesthetic and artists that represent it. These artists help to show us that we don't need to fight tooth and nail our entire lives to move to some city, live in a luxury high-rise, or own expensive brands. We can appreciate our own small-town lives, romanticizing our experiences, and therefore gaining more agency and control over our mental health and sense of fulfillment. I specifically see Ethel Cain and Chappell Roan as not only examples of working class small town reclamation, but even queer cultural acceptance as well.
I've always wanted to tie my project back here. Like, for some reason, even though I felt like I didn't belong, it was just like a part of me to be like, I have to honor this place that raised me no matter no matter how I feel about it. Like, it's just always going to be a part of me.
Many minorities inherently feel they don't belong unless they grew up in a diverse city, meaning they don't really have a choice but to leave a small hometown, feeling it inherently holds no value because of its limitations. And while there is definitely still truth in that, I still think what Ethel Cain and Chappell Roan do is show us that it's still our small town culture too, and that we deserve the chance to appreciate it as well. These artists, those like them, and this amateur, low-budget-esque working class aesthetic are representative of a shift in culture from the out-of-reach, materialistic, fame-hungry, wealth-desiring mindsets of the past. Maybe your life doesn't need to radically change to have significance. Maybe you don't have to change to become valuable. Maybe you already have the tools yourself to be happy and content. So, are we living in a new romantic period? Well, like I said, I don't think we ever really left one. but I definitely think we are seeing a current revival in its popularity. When the capitalistic material promises seem too out of reach for too many, when the world feels uncertain and dystopian, and when new technology shifts our perception of individualism, people will place more value on their lives and experiences because it's a tried and tested way to cope. It soothes our existential anxieties by giving us something we can control, giving us purpose and significance detached from the out of reach accolades of class and wealth. Using the amateur aesthetic and romanticizing life takes a profound stance on the modern world. I'm rejecting what I'm told I need to be happy so I can be happy without the need to be told.